Hello friends, happy weekend. My name is Lilith and I'm hosting our Sketchbook Sunday this week. The theme for this week is Fragments of Summer, where I'll be going back and looking at a few highlights that I've shared with my friends and family during the past few months. I started out with a grid of 6 squares, 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. I'm going in with a wooden pencil, which is 2B. It's a fairly hard pencil by my standards because I don't like using H. Anything past HB I'm not a fan of. I would rather just use a mechanical pencil at that point. So here I'm trying to keep the drawing gestural. Even though it's small, I can still use my arms versus my wrist, just marking down the motion of the head turning. I cut a small piece of eraser because this gives me a clean hard edge and soft edge, as well as more control, given the scale of the drawing. And here I am just going back, detailing a few things, trying to decide which parts I should make darker and which lighter. Because this is the first drawing, it's always a little bit uncertain. I knew that I would be going back to this drawing and fixing it as I complete the other ones. So it's good to keep the lines gestural and casual, I would say. For the next drawing, I'm looking at a shadowscape that I captured in Tyler's apartment when I visited in Ithaca. I knew that this drawing would be very dark, and I was interested in the value of midtones, trying to capture the atmosphere. As I was darkening the values, I realized that the first drawing was too light, which is to be expected. So I also went back and touched that one up too. So here I am just balancing out the values between the two drawings, even though I don't necessarily want to connect them narratively, but I want them to share the same space on the page so that one doesn't overpower the other. After filling out the bulk of the darks, I began working on details, focusing on the undulation of shadows as if light were passing through the trees. I used a mechanical pencil on the edges of the square to make the edges clean. For the third picture, I wanted to focus on directionality of the line and less on value. So keeping the lines delicate, going in the same direction, or contrasting with each other to create an illusion of space. Because I wasn't sure whether or not I'll color this, I went in directly with a mechanical pencil to keep the lines light. With the third drawing being so linear, I wanted something more pattern-oriented for the fourth drawing. Here, I used small dots, circles, and lines to create value and depth. I've always been interested in the combination of geometric and organic. So rather than diagonals like the previous picture, this one contains clusters. When I was drawing this figure's hand, I didn't realize that I made the hand too small because I didn't factor in for shortening. As I'm drawing her, I keep in mind to constantly turn my pencil so that I can keep the sharp point consistent. This means that I don't have to stop as many times to sharpen my pencil. By rotating the pencil in my hand every time I make a couple of marks, I can keep on drawing. The reference for this figure had poor lighting, so I decided to emphasize on her long black hair. It always felt very satisfying drawing very long lines like this. It sort of reminds me of seaweed, but not. As you can see, the light source here is also backlit, but luckily I had enough contrast in her dark hair to keep the picture interesting. I'm mixing a warm and cool violet with white to create the plant that hangs above my head at the shop in Toronto. Oh, there's Annabelle. I'm using 3 different paints, sort of. Acrylic wash, gouache, and artist watercolor. I used an old dried brush because I wanted the plant to look natural. If the plant was too rendered and perfect, the figure of my head would seem out of balance. For drawing like this, dry brush, it's best to keep as little water as possible and not to load the brush too much. It's also good to test on a separate piece of paper before drawing, so don't be like me. And here I am mixing up desaturated dark and cool reds. I'm using a green as a complement to desaturate. As you can see, the artist watercolor is quite gummy. This is because I didn't put too much water in. I came across this sculpture in the Corny Museum of Glass when I was visiting Tyler and Annabelle in Ithaca. Instead of trying to make the tiny details super realistic, I'm taking more of an impressionist approach, using different dots of colors next to each other to stimulate the eye. I'm going for analogous colors because I want harmony. The overall mood for the original sculpture seemed solemn to me, so I didn't want too many complementaries as that would be very energetic. When you're painting, it is important to put down more paint than you think you need. It's also important to know how much water to use and to include colors that you don't see in your reference image. I feel like this is not the best example because you can see that I don't have too much paint on my palette, but that's because I know going into this that I will be drawing with the paint primarily. With gouache and acrylic wash, it's important not to use too much water. They work best when they are opaque and flat. I am turning and adjusting my brush constantly in my grip. This is because I am working with the very tip of the brush and I needed a consistent flow of paint. Because of the opacity, gouache and acrylic wash are really great mediums for learning color theory. This is because you rely less on blending once the paint has been applied. And that means planning out the values and saturations before putting the paint down. Practicing with gouache and acrylic wash can also improve your painting skills if you prefer digital mediums. I was happy with the overall effect because it gave an illusion of flowers or pastures, which was also what I was thinking of when I saw the sculpture in real life. And here I included a calf because I'm a Taurus. I made the calf slightly more orange as a complement to the purple, but just a little bit so that they're still sort of in the same neighborhood. I was in New York for a week visiting my friend, her cat, and her roommate. Her cat loves to play with her friend on the window. I mixed up a fairly neutral color using a mint and a pink for the background. Once again, I am keeping in mind of what other colors I used for the other pictures. Initially, I wanted to block out all the white so that there was no white left on the sides of her body, but then I realized that I took away too much highlight, so I stopped doing that. I wanted to indicate her body in the negative space using a darker color. I'm not completely happy with how the paint is around her hair, so I think I'll do better next time. I hope you enjoyed this video and my ramblings. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.